Carlo Acutis was born in 1991 in London, but lived much of his life in Milan, Italy. From an early age, he showed an extraordinary faith, marked by a deep devotion to the Eucharist. His simple life, set within the daily routine of a teenager of his time, revealed a heart turned toward God, even amid the distractions of the modern world. He liked video games, programming, and technology, but he used those gifts to evangelize. His website on Eucharistic miracles became a powerful tool of evangelization, anticipating the role of the internet in spreading the Catholic faith. What impressed most about Carlo was not only his intelligence, but a spiritual maturity uncommon in someone so young. Even as a child, he showed an inclination to prayer, always insisting on praying the rosary and taking part in Holy Mass daily. He was aware that earthly life is brief and that only the love of God gives meaning to existence. That awareness led him to choose a path of holiness in the normality of his life, without needing grand feats, but with daily fidelity. Carlo did not limit himself to his personal practice of piety. He was concerned for the poor, helped those in need, and defended classmates who were victims of bullying. His charity was concrete, rooted in his faith and in the conviction that Christ was present in every person. That social dimension of the gospel was an integral part of his life, showing that holiness is not something distant, but possible in the everyday life of any Christian. Another central point in his life was the Eucharist. Carlo called it his highway to heaven. Mass and adoration of the Most Blessed Sacrament were the center of his spirituality, and this set him apart from so many other young people his age. He deeply understood the mystery of the real presence of Christ in the sacrament of the altar, and he made his life a reflection of that Eucharistic faith. His devotion to the Virgin Mary was also striking. Carlo prayed the rosary daily and had total confidence in the intercession of the Mother of God. He knew that the path to Christ passes through Mary, and therefore he cultivated a filial relationship with the Most Holy Virgin. This Marian devotion helped him to remain firm in the face of difficulties, especially during the period of his illness. In 2006, Carlo was diagnosed with fulminant leukemia. Despite intense physical suffering, he offered his sufferings to God for the Pope and for the Church. This attitude, far from being a desperate gesture, showed his spiritual maturity and the depth of his union with the crucified Christ. He did not let himself be cast down, but lived his illness with serenity and unshakable faith. At 15, Carlo died, leaving a witness that astonished family, friends, and the whole church. His short life became a luminous example for young people and adults, revealing that holiness is a vocation possible for everyone, regardless of age. His reputation for holiness spread quickly, fed by the popular devotion that grew around his memory. The beatification process began in 2013, only 7 years after his death. His life was examined rigorously, showing the heroism of his virtues and the authenticity of his Christian witness. From the start, it was clear that Carlo was an example for the youth of the 21st century, called to live holiness amid the technological and cultural realities of our time. Beatification took place on October 10, 2020, in Assisi, the city of St. Francis, a saint who deeply inspired Carlo. That moment marked Carlo's official entrance among the blesseds of the Church, and his reputation for holiness gained even greater proportions. Multitudes followed the ceremony, seeing in him a powerful intercessor and a model of Christian life. The canonization of Carlo Acutis, which is underway and arouses enormous expectation, is seen as a providential sign for the Church. In a time marked by cultural, secular, and spiritual challenges, his life shows that it is possible to be a saint in the digital world, using technology as an instrument to proclaim Christ. His canonization will be a historic milestone, for Carlo will be the first blessed of the internet generation to be raised to the honors of the altars. Canonization is the solemn act by which the Catholic Church officially declares that a faithful person lived in heroic holiness and is in the glory of heaven and is therefore worthy of universal veneration. This process has centuries of tradition and is among the most rigorous in the Church, precisely to ensure that the saints proposed as models for the faithful are authentic examples of Christian life. Canonization does not create a saint, but formally recognizes what is already a reality, the union of the faithful with God in eternity. This discernment involves historical studies, theological analyses, testimonies, and above all, the verification of miracles attributed to the candidate's intercession. The path toward canonization is divided into several stages, each with its own requirements. The first title granted to the candidate is Servant of God, given when the process is officially opened. Then, upon recognition of the person's heroic virtues, he is proclaimed Venerable. Next, for beatification, a miracle is required, confirmed through rigorous investigation. Canonization, in turn, generally requires proof of a second miracle occurring after beatification, as a clear sign of the saint's intercession before God. The process is conducted by the Congregation for the Causes of Saints in Rome, today called the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints. This Vatican body gathers theologians, physicians, historians, and cardinals who analyze every detail of the candidate's life and the alleged miracles. It is not a mere formality, but a thorough investigation so that there be no doubts regarding holiness and the supernatural action of God. The Church's prudence in this area reflects her responsibility to propose authentic models of Christian life. A central aspect of this process is the study of heroic virtues. This means evaluating whether the candidate lived the theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity, and the cardinal virtues, prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, in an extraordinary way. It is not enough that he was a good person, it is necessary that he lived to a heroic degree, that is, with a self-giving to God above the common average. It is precisely this extraordinary living that makes him a model for the faithful. Besides the virtues, the process analyzes the candidate's writings, speeches, and actions. Everything is carefully investigated to ensure that his doctrine and witness are in full conformity with the Catholic faith. The Church has the mission to protect the faithful from possible errors, which is why the investigation is so meticulous. In the case of Carlo Acutis, this was made easier by the fact that he left a legacy of digital evangelization, texts, reflections, and life testimonies that confirm his fidelity to the magisterium of the Church. Another essential element is the recognition of miracles. A miracle is defined as an extraordinary fact, without a natural or scientific explanation, that occurs through the intercession of the candidate. These are generally instantaneous and permanent medical cures, subjected to rigorous scientific and medical analysis. If there is no rational explanation, and if the link with prayer to the candidate is clear, then the miracle is recognized as authentic. This sign serves as divine confirmation of the person's holiness. For the beatification of Carlo Acutis, the Church recognized as a miracle the inexplicable healing of a Brazilian boy in Campo Grande who suffered from a serious disease of the pancreas. After touching a relic of Carlo, the boy was healed instantly and definitively, without any medical explanation. This fact was widely studied and confirmed by Vatican experts, allowing Carlo to be proclaimed blessed in 2020. This first miracle already showed the power of his intercession before God. For canonization, the Church normally requires a second miracle occurring after beatification. This shows that the Blessed continues to intercede for the faithful and that his holiness is recognized by the entire Church. In Carlo's case, there are reports of new miracles attributed to his intercession, which are under study by the Vatican. Although not yet officially declared, it is a matter of time until the definitive sign is confirmed that will open the doors to his canonization. The process is not just a bureaucratic procedure, but a true celebration of holiness. Each stage is accompanied by great fervor of the faithful who see in beatification and canonization not only the recognition of an individual, but also a message for the whole Church. In Carlo's case, the expectation is even greater because he represents a new generation of saints, young, connected to the digital world, but deeply rooted in the faith. Thus, the canonization of Carlo Acutis is not only the confirmation of his life of holiness, but also a call to the entire Church. It shows that holiness is possible today, in the 21st century, even amid social networks, digital culture, and the challenges of modernity. This process reminds us that the vocation to holiness is not exclusive to monks or priests, but to all Christians. Carlo is therefore a providential sign of God for our time, and his canonization will have an immense spiritual impact. The history of holiness has always been accompanied by extraordinary signs that confirm God's action through his saints. In the case of Carlo Acutis, it is no different. Since his death, countless accounts of graces, healings, and conversions have been attributed to his intercession. These miracles are not merely spectacular phenomena, but concrete signs of God's love manifested through those who lived in holiness. Carlo's brief life, which ended at age 15, continues to bear fruit on earth through these extraordinary testimonies. The first miracle officially recognized by the Church took place in Brazil, in Campo Grande, in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul. A boy only 4 years old suffered from a rare congenital disease of the pancreas called annular pancreas. The child could not feed normally and was gravely debilitated. His parents, fervent Catholics, prayed asking for the intercession of Carlo Acutis and took the boy to a parish where there was a relic of the young Italian. The decisive moment happened when the boy, upon touching Carlo's relic, was healed instantly and completely. Subsequent medical exams confirmed that there was no longer any sign of the disease. The doctors found no scientific explanation for the cure, classifying the case as something humanly impossible. This healing was investigated in detail by the Congregation for the Causes of Saints, which, after consulting medical experts and theologians, declared the fact an authentic miracle. This miracle opened the doors to Carlo's beatification in 2020. The impact was enormous not only in Brazil, but throughout the world, for it showed how a young man who lived in our time continues to act powerfully in heaven. For many, this miracle was a sign that God wished to highlight Carlo as an example for the young people of the 21st century. The news spread quickly, strengthening popular devotion around him and inspiring even more people to seek his intercession. After beatification, new reports of possible miracles arose in various parts of the world. Faithful from different countries have testified to physical healings, spiritual graces, and conversions attributed to prayer to Carlo. These testimonies, even if not all have the character of a miracle, reveal a powerful intercession and a growing devotion. Many young people in particular feel inspired by Carlo and turn to him in moments of difficulty, obtaining surprising answers from God through his intercession. Among the strongest accounts is that of a woman who suffered from a terminal illness and, after asking for Carlo's intercession, showed a sudden and unexpected improvement. Another case involves a young man who had been away from the faith and, upon learning Carlo's story, experienced a profound conversion, returning to the Church and completely changing his life. Although not all these facts can be considered miracles in the strict sense, They are signs of a concrete spiritual action. The canonization process requires proof of a second miracle, and there are currently reports under study by the Vatican. One of these cases involves the healing of a woman in Italy who suffered from a serious neurological disease. Another case, still at a preliminary stage, involves an African child who is said to have been cured after prayers addressed to Carlo. The Vatican conducts these investigations with extreme rigor, analyzing medical documents and testimonies and verifying whether there is no natural explanation. What is striking about the miracles attributed to Carlo is his closeness to young people and families. Many of the cases involve children and adolescents, which seems to be a providential sign. It is as if God wanted to show, through Carlo, that holiness is accessible from an early age and that young people can indeed be instruments of grace for the world. This aspect further reinforces the value of his canonization, which will be a historic milestone for the Church. In addition to physical cures, an impressive number of people testify to spiritual graces received through Carlo's intercession. Many report a return to the faith, family reconciliation, and strength to face illnesses and hardships. These testimonies are no less important, for they show that Carlo not only heals bodies, but also touches hearts. His life of love for the Eucharist continues to radiate light and hope, reaching people in every corner of the planet. In summary, the miracles attributed to Carlo Acutis are evident signs of God's action through his life and intercession in heaven. They confirm what many already believed. Carlo is an example of holiness for our time and a powerful intercessor for those who seek God amid the difficulties of modern life. His canonization, when confirmed, will be not only the Church's official recognition, but also a testimony that holiness continues to flourish among today's youth. Contemporary youth live in a context marked by unique challenges: unprecedented technological advancement, excess of information, identity crises, moral relativism, and often the absence of solid points of reference to guide life. In this setting, the canonization of Carlo Acutis emerges as a providential response of the Church, offering a model of youthful holiness that is current and deeply rooted in faith. Carlo shows that it is not necessary to flee the modern world to be holy. On the contrary, it is possible to live at the heart of digital culture without losing sight of eternity. For young people, Carlo becomes an accessible mirror. He liked video games, played sports, had friends, used social networks, and lived like any teenager of his time. But at the same time, he cultivated a deep spirituality which kept him in constant union with Christ. This balance is fascinating and inspiring. Carlo shows that holiness is not about abandoning common interests of youth, but about directing them to the good and to God. This lesson is of incalculable value for young people who seek to reconcile faith and modernity. His canonization will have a powerful pedagogical effect. The Church has always presented saints as models to be imitated, but many young people might find the figure of medieval saints or those from centuries past distant. Carlo, however, belonged to the internet generation and therefore speaks directly to the hearts of today's adolescents and young adults. His brief but intense life teaches that one need not wait to grow old in order to seek holiness. Holiness can and must be lived from an early age, in everyday life, in simple choices and in small gestures. Moreover, Carlo conveys a message of hope in the face of modern temptations. Many young people believe it is impossible to be holy in a world marked by vices, digital distractions, and moral crises. Yet Carlo shows that even surrounded by the same temptations everyone faces, it is possible to remain faithful to Christ. His life confirms that God's grace is stronger than sin and that youth can be the most fruitful time to love God with all one's heart. One of the most impactful aspects of Carlo's life for young people is his relationship with the Eucharist. He used to say that the Eucharist is my highway to heaven. This simple yet profound sentence sums up the centrality of the sacrament in his life. At a time when many young people drift away from Mass and adoration, Carlo teaches that true happiness is not found on screens, but in the real encounter with Jesus in the Eucharist. This Eucharistic witness can rekindle the faith of thousands of young people around the world. Another important point is his relationship with charity. Carlo did not limit himself to prayer and the sacraments. He also dedicated himself to helping the poor, defending classmates who suffered exclusion, and practicing kindness in daily life. This shows young people that faith cannot be only theory, but must be lived concretely in love of neighbor. In times when individualism prevails, Carlo teaches that holiness is manifested in the ability to see Christ in the other and to serve with generosity. The canonization of Carlo will also be a call to purity of heart. He lived in a digital environment, but knew how to avoid content that could harm his soul, always seeking to use the internet as a means of evangelization. This aspect is profoundly educational for young people who daily face the dangers of social networks and pornography. Carlo proves that it is possible to be young, to use technology, and at the same time to keep a pure heart turned toward God. This message will be one of the strongest of his canonization. For young people who suffer, Carlo is a special companion. He faced the pain of leukemia with serenity, offering his sufferings to God. This attitude makes him an example for those who deal with illnesses, anxieties, or emotional pain. Many young people, upon getting to know his story, find comfort in realizing that Carlo also went through hardships and yet did not lose the joy of faith. His canonization will give even more strength to these testimonies, showing that the cross, when embraced with love, becomes a source of holiness. Another profound meaning for youth is the awareness that Carlo had little time, but lived his vocation intensely. In just 15 years, he left an indelible mark on the world and on the Church. This shows young people that the length of life does not matter, but rather the intensity with which one lives love for God and neighbor. In a world that preaches superficiality and the incessant search for pleasures, Carlo shows that true fulfillment lies in spending one's life for Christ and for brothers and sisters. In conclusion, the canonization of Carlo Acutis will have an immense impact on Catholic youth and beyond. He will be proclaimed as a universal model of holiness, especially for young people who seek meaning for their lives. His story will be a light shining amid the darkness of relativism and of a digital culture without God. Carlo will show, clearly and concretely, that it is possible to be holy today, that youth can be holy, and that each young person is called to transform his life into a reflection of the eternal love of God. Since his death in 2006, the figure of Carlo Acutis began to awaken a spontaneous devotion among those who knew him and, later, among thousands of people who learned about his life. This popular devotion grew rapidly, in a surprising way, especially after the opening of his cause of canonization. Faithful from different countries began to seek his intercession, bringing his stories, images, and relics to Catholic communities around the world. Carlo ceased to be only a young Italian to become a global symbol of hope and holiness for youth. A striking aspect of popular devotion to Carlo is the international dimension it assumed in a short time. Normally, devotion to a blessed or saint grows first in his native region and gradually expands. In Carlo's case, however, his connection with the internet and the worldwide reach of his initiatives, such as the digital exhibition on Eucharistic miracles, made his fame cross borders already in the first years. Today, Catholic communities on all continents already know and venerate his memory. In Brazil, devotion to Carlo is especially strong, partly because the miracle that made his beatification possible took place in the country. Many Brazilian parishes already have images, relics, and prayer groups dedicated to him. Young people and adolescents take him as an intercessor and model of Christian life. It is common to see youth ministry meetings, catechesis and prayer groups highlighting Carlo as an example of faith, showing how his figure speaks directly to the reality of Brazilian youth. In Europe, especially in Italy, Carlo is increasingly recognized as a saint of the young. Thousands of pilgrims visit Assisi every year, where his mortal remains are preserved. His body, displayed in a reliquary, has become a place of prayer and encounter with God for many faithful. The city of Assisi, already marked by the presence of Saint Francis and Saint Clare, has gained in Carlo a new spiritual reference point, able to speak to a different generation, connected to technology, yet thirsty for meaning in life. In the United States, devotion is also growing rapidly. Many dioceses organize prayer meetings, masses, and conferences to present Carlo's life as an inspiration for youth. Catholic schools and universities promote talks and exhibits about his story, highlighting his passion for the Eucharist. Young Americans find in him a concrete example of how it is possible to be faithful to Christ, even amid the cultural pressures of an increasingly secularized society. In Africa and Asia, devotion to Carlo also flourishes. Reports of graces received through his intercession multiply in countries such as India, the Philippines, and Nigeria. In these regions, youth face enormous challenges. From poverty to religious persecutions, Carlo, with his simple and faith-filled witness, has become a source of courage for young people who seek to remain firm in the Catholic faith. His universal figure makes him close to all, regardless of culture or nationality. A decisive element for the expansion of this devotion is the power of the internet. Carlo, who in life used the web to evangelize, continues to do so after death. Thousands of pages on social networks, YouTube channels, blogs, and websites are dedicated to his life and spirituality. He is often called the patron of the internet, precisely because he knew how to transform a tool often used for evil into an instrument of evangelization. This digital dimension makes his message reach places where missionaries perhaps cannot go. Carlo's relics, carried on pilgrimage to various countries, have also strengthened this popular devotion. Churches fill up to receive his relics, and the faithful take advantage of these moments to bear witness to graces obtained. In many cases, young people who had been away from the faith return to Christian life after taking part in these pilgrimages. The physical presence of his relics awakens in the faithful a concrete awareness of the closeness of the saints, and thus Carlo becomes even more present in the heart of the Church. It is impressive to observe how Carlo draws not only young people, but also adults and the elderly. Many parents and grandparents, upon getting to know his life, see in him an example to be passed on to new generations. They understand that Carlo can be a great ally in the mission of educating children and grandchildren in the Catholic faith. This shows that devotion to Carlo is not limited to a specific audience, but reaches the whole family, becoming a bond of spiritual unity. In summary, popular devotion to Carlo Acutis is a phenomenon that crosses geographic and cultural borders. His figure is loved throughout the world, and his canonization, when proclaimed, will only further reinforce this devotion. He will be officially recognized as a universal model of holiness, and this will give even greater strength to the expressions of faith already present in the hearts of the faithful. Carlo is not only a saint of Italy, but a saint of the world, able to speak to the heart of humanity in times of challenges and uncertainties. The Catholic Church, over the centuries, has always presented saints who responded to the spiritual needs of each age. In the 21st century, marked by globalization, technological advancement, and growing secularization, Carlo Acutis emerges as a providential figure. He embodies the perfect synthesis between modernity and tradition, showing that it is possible to live in the digital world without getting lost in its snares while remaining rooted in the faith. His canonization will therefore have a strategic role for the Church, for it offers a current and accessible model for the new generation. One of the most important aspects of Carlo for our time is his ability to evangelize in the digital environment. When many see the internet only as a place of distractions and dangers, Carlo turned it into a space for announcing the gospel. He created online exhibitions, used programming and social networks to spread the faith, and left a legacy that continues to inspire digital missionary initiatives. He proves that technology, when used with responsibility and faith, can be a powerful tool of sanctification and apostolate. The centrality of the Eucharist in his life is also a necessary response to our time. We live in an age in which many Catholics drift away from Sunday Mass and do not understand the greatness of the sacrament. Carlo, however, dedicated his life to Jesus in the Eucharist, participating daily in Holy Mass and in adoration. By proclaiming his holiness, the Church reaffirms for the 21st century the need to rediscover the Eucharist as the source and summit of Christian life. He thus becomes a young voice, reminding the faithful of the heart of the Catholic faith. Another essential point is his purity of life. In a world marked by pornography, consumerism, and the trivialization of values, Carlo lived in a clean and faithful way. He used the internet, but knew how to avoid content harmful to his soul, always choosing what was good and edifying. This attitude makes him an especially necessary model for young people who face daily temptations in the digital environment. His canonization will reaffirm that it is possible to live chastity and purity in our time, even when surrounded by challenges. Carlo's charity also sets him as an example for the Church today. He did not limit himself to praying and living an intimate spirituality, but put his faith into action, helping the poor and defending the weakest. In times of social and economic crises, his figure reminds Catholics that faith cannot be only interior, but must be translated into works of love. The Church finds in him a model of a young man who knew how to unite prayer and action, spirituality and social commitment. His Marian spirituality is equally significant. Carlo prayed the Rosary daily and had a deep trust in the Virgin Mary. In the 21st century, when so many ideologies try to lead young people away from the faith, his devotion to the Mother of God shows that true freedom lies in living under Mary's maternal protection. This Marian witness rekindles the importance of consecration and devotion to Our Lady as a safe path to remain faithful to Christ. Another relevant factor is his ability to draw young people not by imposing, but by inspiring. Carlo did not preach with long speeches, but with his simple and authentic life. He had friends and took part in common activities, but his joy and his faith aroused in others a curiosity about what made him different. This form of evangelization by witness is extremely effective in our time, in which many reject religious impositions but open themselves before concrete examples of a life transformed by faith. For the Church, Carlo also represents a sign of vocational renewal. Many young people, upon learning of his life, feel called to follow Christ more closely, whether in the priestly, religious, or matrimonial life. He shows that every vocation is a path of holiness, and that God calls each one to live with fidelity and love the state of life entrusted to him. In this sense, his canonization will have a deep impact on vocations, encouraging many to respond with courage to the divine call. His importance for the 21st century is not limited to the young. Carlo is also an example for adults and families, reminding them that it is possible to educate children in the faith amid the difficulties of modernity. His parents, especially his mother, played a fundamental role in his spiritual formation, and this shows how the family continues to be the cradle of holiness. In an age in which the family is constantly attacked, Carlo appears as the fruit of a solid Christian education, reaffirming the irreplaceable mission of parents in transmitting the faith. In conclusion, Carlo Acutis is a response from God for the Church of the 21st century. He unites tradition and modernity, spirituality and technology, prayer and charity, purity and joy. His canonization will not be only an individual recognition, but a clear message to all the people of God. Holiness is possible today, even amid the complexities of the modern world. Carlo will be proclaimed as a beacon for our time, showing that Christ continues to call young people and adults to live the fullness of the gospel. The life of Carlo Acutis, though brief, contains a spiritual message of enormous depth. His witness recalls that holiness is not the privilege of a few nor a distant reality, but the vocation of all the baptized. He lived simply, but always with his eyes fixed on heaven, transforming every gesture into an act of love for God and neighbor. His spirituality did not consist of extraordinary practices, but of daily fidelity, showing that the path of holiness is accessible to all at any age or circumstance. The first central aspect of his spiritual message is the Eucharist. Carlo said that the Eucharist is my highway to heaven, and in fact, he made the most blessed sacrament the heart of his life. This conviction shows the faithful that there is no holiness without the living Christ in the Eucharist. He teaches that to be holy, it is necessary to place Mass and adoration at the center of Christian life, for there lies the source of grace. His spiritual message therefore leads the Church back to the essence, the real presence of Jesus, who nourishes and strengthens the path of faith. Another essential point is the simplicity of Christian life. Carlo never performed great external feats, did not found religious orders, and did not write theological treatises. His great work was to live each day well, with fidelity, prayer, and charity. This aspect has immense spiritual value, for it shows that God does not ask the impossible of us, but that we live the ordinary with extraordinary love. This message inspires Christians who often think that holiness is beyond their reach. Carlo proves that all can be saints in ordinary life. Carlo's spirituality is also deeply linked to concrete charity. He was not content to pray, but transformed his faith into works. He helped the poor, defended schoolmates who were mocked, and placed himself at the service of those in need. His life reminds us that prayer without charity is incomplete, and that holiness requires active love of neighbor. He shows that every Christian, in his own environment, can be a sign of God's love, whether at school, at work, or at home. Another striking point in his spiritual message is purity of heart. Carlo lived his adolescence at a time when the internet was already present, with all its dangers and temptations. Nevertheless, he knew how to use it as an instrument of evangelization, avoiding what could harm his soul. This witness is profoundly current. Carlo teaches that it is possible to be young, to use modern technologies, and yet to preserve innocence and purity. He shows that holiness is forged in daily choices, especially in the digital world. Devotion to Mary is another prominent spiritual element. Carlo prayed the Rosary every day and trusted deeply in the intercession of the Mother of God. He understood that Mary is the sure path to Christ and lived his faith with Marian filial devotion. This message is important for the 21st century, in which many drift away from prayer and devotion. Carlo reminds us that to remain faithful, we must walk with Mary, who guides Christians to the heart of Jesus. Carlo's spiritual message is also linked to the meaning of suffering. When he received the diagnosis of fulminant leukemia, he offered his pain for the Pope and for the Church. Instead of rebelling, he embraced his cross with serenity and faith. This gesture teaches the faithful that suffering, when united to Christ, is transformed into a source of sanctification and salvation. Carlo shows that even pain can be a path of love when offered generously. This spiritual lesson is of enormous value for all who face trials. Another teaching of his life is the use of personal gifts for the glory of God. Carlo was passionate about computer science and programming, and he could have used these talents only for distraction or for himself. However, he placed his ability at the service of evangelization, creating websites and digital exhibitions on Eucharistic miracles. This attitude shows that every Christian should place his talents at the service of the kingdom of God. His message is clear. Everything we are and have must be handed over to Christ so that it may bear fruit for others. Carlo's spirituality also has a strong character of joy and witness of life. He did not live the faith as a burden, but as the source of true happiness. His joy captivated classmates and awakened in them the desire to know the reason for his hope. This aspect is fundamental. Carlo teaches that a Christian should not be sad or pessimistic, but joyful, because he has found in Christ the true life. This joy evangelizes more than words and is a luminous trait of his spiritual message. In conclusion, the spiritual message of Carlo Acutis is a universal invitation to holiness lived in daily life. He teaches that the Eucharist, prayer, purity, charity, Marian devotion, and the acceptance of suffering are sure paths to heaven. His life shows that it is possible to be young and at the same time deeply united to God. This message is not limited to adolescents, but reaches all the faithful, recalling that holiness is the goal of every Christian. His canonization will reinforce this message, making Carlo a spiritual guide for the Church of our time. The canonization of Carlo Acutis will be an unprecedented historical milestone in the life of the Catholic Church. Although over the centuries, the Church has recognized the holiness of young people, martyrs, and people of various ages and conditions, Carlo stands out as the first blessed who truly belonged to the digital generation. His proclamation as a saint will show that holiness is not something reserved to the past or to people from distant historical contexts, but a reality possible at the heart of the contemporary world, amid a technological and globalized culture. This canonization will have enormous symbolic weight. By raising Carlo to the honors of the altars, the Church will be sending a clear message to the world. Holiness is compatible with modernity, with the internet, with youth, and with the challenges of present-day life. He will be recognized as a model for those who wish to use digital means not for perdition, but for the good. This historic gesture will be a universal call to transform modern tools into instruments of evangelization and of building the kingdom of God. Moreover, Carlo's canonization will be a moment of renewal for Catholic youth. Many young people feel distant from the Church, believing that she has nothing more to offer them. However, upon seeing a young man of only 15 years old, who liked video games, the internet and technology, proclaimed a saint, they will realize that the Church is still alive and that holiness is possible for them as well. This historic milestone will serve as a bridge between the Church and the new generations, so in need of concrete models of faith. From a pastoral point of view, Carlo's canonization will also be an impetus for digital evangelization. He is already considered the patron of the internet by many faithful, and his official recognition as a saint will further reinforce this role. The Church will find in him an ally to promote the responsible and Christian use of social networks, showing that technology can be a path of salvation. It will be a historic milestone because, for the first time, the Church will have an official saint directly linked to digital culture, recognizing the value and impact of that environment on spiritual life. Another historical aspect will be the impact on catechesis and Christian formation. Catechists, educators, and families will have in Carlo an example that speaks the language of young people and that can be used as a bridge to transmit eternal values. His canonization will facilitate evangelization, for young people identify with him and see in him someone who lived the same challenges they face today. This will have a deep pedagogical effect, renewing methods of teaching the faith and drawing more hearts to Christ. Carlo's canonization will also mark the continuity of the Church's tradition of recognizing God's action in the simplest and most humble. He did not perform miracles during his life, did not found religious orders, was not a martyr in the classic sense, but he lived ordinary things in an extraordinary way. This historical recognition reinforces the idea that holiness does not depend on spectacular deeds, but on daily fidelity to God. It will be a sign for the whole Church that each faithful in his state of life can and must seek Christian perfection. Worldwide, this event will be followed by millions of faithful Catholics and even non-Catholics. Carlo's witness touches people of different religions or even of no faith, precisely because of his authenticity and simplicity. His canonization will therefore have an ecumenical and interreligious impact, awakening dialogues and reflections on the meaning of life, youth, and spirituality in a world in crisis. This global reach reinforces the historical dimension of the event, which will not be restricted to the Church, but will radiate its light to all humanity. Another striking point will be the strengthening of the already existing popular devotion. After canonization, Carlo will be officially venerated throughout the Church, and his liturgical memorial will become universal. Churches, parishes, schools, and communities around the world will begin to celebrate his feast, keeping his spiritual message alive. This official recognition will give even more credibility to the graces and miracles attributed to his intercession, consolidating him as a beloved and trustworthy intercessor for the faithful. Historically, Carlo's canonization will also be a moment of hope for families and educators. In a world where many parents worry about the loss of their children's faith, Carlo will be presented as living proof that it is possible to educate in holiness even in difficult times. His life will be an inspiration for Catholic families, showing that Christian education, allied to God's grace, can bear holy fruit. This historical aspect will have a profound impact on how the Church guides fathers and mothers in the 21st century. In conclusion, the canonization of Carlo Acutis will be a historical milestone because it will unite past and present, tradition and modernity, youth and holiness. He will be officially recognized as a saint of the digital generation, opening new paths for evangelization and renewing the hope of the entire Church. His brief but intense life will leave a definitive mark on the history of Christian holiness. Carlo will become not just one more saint among many, but a sign of the times, showing that God continues to raise up saints who respond to the challenges of each age with courage, faith, and love.